So just an introduction to myself. So my name is Ben Pomerenke. I'm a software developer at Worldwide Technology. I've been a developer for 12 plus years, 9 of them with WWT. So our company actually does project-based consulting. What that means is we help customers do project initiatives. So either building new applications or retrofitting old applications, but anything that basically you can form a team around. That team can operate for some amount of months or weeks, and then deliver a finalized product. All along the way, we use agile methodologies, lean methodologies to help iterate and build what they need. And so a lot of times, that will incorporate just general lean processes, but sometimes we'll actually use this kind of more cutting edge, expansion of the lean process called LeanUX. I will say I'm going to talk about this in the context of my interactions with it. Jesse and Kate are here as well. They work for our company as well. They actually put on the actual workshop we did and kind of drove a lot of the why we do all this stuff. And they actually do this in the real world for their day job. But for me, I'm going to be referencing a month-long project that we did in our Springfield office. That was really kind of between customer projects. So when we have that gap time, we get to do experiment with new processes, learn new ways of doing things, practice existing ways of doing things. So this was a really cool chance I got to have in February of this year. So when I talk about the project, that's what I'm talking about. This isn't an actual customer project, but we do this on customer projects as well. All right, so starting off, what is LeanUX? So a lot of the things we were doing were based off this book called LeanUX. And according to the authors, it's a practice of bringing the true nature of a product to light faster in a collaborative cross-function way that reduces the emphasis on thorough documentation while increasing the focus to build a shared understanding of the actual product experience that's being designed. So that's a lot of words to describe this, but really the whole point of this is, hey, we're gonna learn a lot of things while we build this software. So instead of doing the classic design process where you may, spend weeks figuring out what you're gonna build, we do it in a much more iterative fashion. And that allows us to keep the product focus in mind every decision we make. And then we can continually build and improve on that stuff. So the actual process is pretty well defined. And this comes from the book. In my mind, this actually makes a lot more sense than what we generally do. So you generally, at least I think, somebody says, hey, I have this problem, I want to solve it. And you pull together all common patterns in software and come up with some really clean design and way to that problem. But most of that work is done in a vacuum. It's usually with somebody in the creative department. Maybe they're working with the customer to flesh that out. And then as a developer, I kind of just get, hey, this is what you're building. So the LeanUX process, like I said before, or maybe you didn't hear that, but you start with what you're trying, with the problem you're trying to solve, and you work backwards. So in this case, you start with a problem statement. So the problem statement for us is usually, why are you trying to build something? What's it supposed to do? Who's it trying to do it for? What does the market look like that you're trying to introduce this project into? And there's actually a very good template in this book that we use, and I'll show you our project's problem statement here in a second. But then you move through and you say, okay, now based on that problem statement, what am I actually gonna, what are the actual things in play here? What are my assumptions? And then you work through those, and then you come up with some hypothesis, and then you create an MVP, and then you test, you try to understand what happened, and you kind of loop back. So it's this very iterative process that you work through. What I'm going to show you here in a second is what it looks like to do a workshop, which is kind of the first iteration of that. It's kind of a way to kick off the LeanUX process. And our company actually provides this as a service to our customers. All right, so like I said before, we provide this as a service, but typically a LeanUX workshop will be 2 to 3 days. It's really a chance to bring everybody that's engaged in the project together and kind of get them all on the same page and figure out what we're actually trying to build. So the types of people that will be there, things like the CEO, the CIO, maybe the project manager, the person that's kind of owning it from the customer perspective, or the product owner. You may have some actual users of the software, potential users for the software. You may have some IT stakeholders, some delivery team members, basically anybody that's going to have any part in building this software. Generally for us, we don't include all of our delivery team at this point. However, that's mostly from a logistical perspective. Sometimes we don't know the delivery team at this point in the sale. So, but for us, we got lucky. The delivery team actually got to be all of those things because we were building software for ourselves. So this is actually a project for our office. Ours was a little bit shorter. It was 2 days. We did some pre-homework to kind of make us need less time. A lot of that was out of respect for Jesse and Kate's valuable time, because they were actually busy satisfying our customers. All right, so for our project, I'm going to walk you through kind of the things we did. So starting with the problem statement. So our problem statement is talking a lot about a reality that we think is true in the Springfield office. So we have 28 people. We have, really engaged, busy people that are all busy doing their valuable work for their customers. And a lot of times they don't take the time to actually, think about what's really going on. So a lot of the things that people think are true about our office are kind of rumor mill. You see one instance of something and you just assume you know what it is. But there's actually, if you step back and you look at the data, a lot of that stuff's actually just misunderstandings. And so we were trying to find a way to present information to people in a way that would not interrupt their day-to-day work. So we still wanted them to be engaged in the customer projects. That's really the work they do. But when they're working together in a shared office space, which it is shared and we're all kind of next to each other, at least we were, they need a way to kind of understand what's really true about this. And you'll see in a second, one of the things we actually ended up landing on as the most important thing to figure out is how do you figure out how often our conference rooms are available. So we do a lot of video conferences with our customers, even when we're in the physical office. We do a lot of like team huddle meetings as well. And conference rooms are kind of a, hot commodity in our office. So we were feeling some pain in the last 6 months from not having enough of them, and just we wanted to show kind of whether or not that was true. So people actually weren't just assuming because they couldn't get it at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday that it was never available. And so that's kind of where we started. So then after the problem statement, we had the benefit of our team being, stakeholders in this project. So as the stakeholders and as the team members, we all filled out this survey, and the survey was provided by by Kate and Jesse, who are providing the actual workshop. But all kinds of questions around what's actually going on here. So do you think people are busy? Do you think they're not busy? Why would they need a tool? Why wouldn't they need a tool? How much time do they have available to use this tool? Is this a check it once a day? Is this a every other second kind of a thing? Are there tools out there like this in the industry? Basically some things that you kind of want to know up front to kind of guide the LeanUX process. And you don't always necessarily fill this out in a worksheet form. Sometimes you can actually do this in person with some of our, we call them ideation techniques, but really they're just ways of collecting data, sussing it out, simplifying it into some common themes, and working from there. So when we actually came in person, after we'd filled this out, kind of the first thing we did was we took all of these assumptions and we kind of coalesced on some problem statements. So things that we thought were actual problems related to our broad problem statement. We kind of came up with some specific examples of things we thought could be fixed. And, you can see this picture. So this was done in a very collaborative fashion. There were 6 of us in the workshop. We would spend, maybe a minute or two writing our thoughts down in stickies. We'd bring them up. We'd tell the group, we'd put it there. If somebody had a duplicate, we'd either smash them together or we would, throw it away. Basically, this is kind of a way to just kind of get all the ideas out there. And so that was kind of our first focus, was let's figure out what all the problems we're trying to solve could be. So next we actually went into who are we trying to solve these problems for. So we developed some personas. And so a persona is a common thing that I think is used in UX in general. I've seen them throughout my career at WWT, but basically it's a way of kind of telling a story about the people you're building this for, and kind of creating this figment or this personality in your head. You know, think of it like if I'm building software for my wife or my best friend, I know that person really well. I'll kind of think ahead of the things that they would want just by picturing who it is I'm building it for. And so we have these, you know, around the office occasionally, depending on what project you're working on. You know, in this picture, this is a great, you know, developer's version of a person. This is our persona, Mike B. I think this team actually got further than we did. I think we had eyes and a nose. But, you know, you can go full bore with this. You can actually get some stock photos to kind of show, to make it more human, to connect with it. But the types of things we kind of focused on when developing these personas were the needs, obstacles, and desires of these people, and then the factors that influence behavior. And so what these do is, like, basically you're implementing a feature. You're like, okay, we're gonna have this widget do something. Well, what would Fiona want to do? Or what would Mike B want this to do? Would they get frustrated by this act? And you kind of start talking about it as if it's a real person. And it just kind of makes your conversations more robust. And so similarly in this exercise, that activity helps us connect the problems with the people. And so for us, we developed two personas, and then everything we'd come up with in the previous session, we kind of connected to those different personas. And so now, you know, at this point in the process, we've done a lot of idea, you know, generation. We put things in kind of their different categories. We'd assigned them to persona. And so now you can kind of step back and see kind of the collection of information that we just put together. And you can kind of start drawing some conclusions just by blurring your eyes a little bit and kind of seeing how things are kind of related. Okay, but we're not quite there yet. So this is some of the input we want, but we have one more step after this. And that is to identify the potential features. So now we're actually going to start talking about software. So everything up till now, we've been talking about business solutions, business processes, things that don't even require software necessarily. They're really just things that are problems in the world. But this is kind of the first time where we actually started to get to think about software. So you can imagine me as a software developer, I think this was like halfway through the day. This is the first time we're talking about features. It was like, I was like in doubt, like the whole first 4 hours. I was like, what's going on here? Like, when are we gonna start talking about the software? But we eventually got to it. And the cool thing was, when you eventually get to it, after you've kind of laid that groundwork that I was talking about, you're now talking about features with a whole different perspective. You know, so like once you actually capture these features, you know, you're trying to figure out, well, what does this connect to? Is this solving this problem, or is this something this person would want? And so it just changes your focus a little bit when you get to this point of the process. It was pretty cool. There were some really cool ideas thrown out there. You guys can probably see the ones out here. Some of them are silly. Some of them are awesome. You know, the whole point here, and this is kind of the whole point of the whole LeanUX workshop and a lot of things we do with our customers, you want to get all the ideas out there. And it's really easy to cull down the ideas into some good ideas. But if you kind of try to only get the good ideas out first, you can waste a lot of time on the wrong ideas, and you miss out on like the little gems that you'll get. So a lot of this LeanUX workshop was kind of designed that way. It was everybody put in some ideas, and together as a team, we will start kind of honing in on which ideas are going to make sense and which ones won't. So that actually leads to the next part of the process. And that is where you actually identify hypothesis. So hypothesis is, you can kind of think of it like a feature or like an initiative. It's really just kind of a line of thinking to solve the problems of the customer or solve the problems of the people. However, one thing that makes it different is you actually, as part of the hypothesis, you have to define what you will do to prove that it worked. So when you're calling it hypothesis, like the scientific method, you come up with an idea of something that will work. and then you actually have to have a way of testing it before you can actually start doing it. And so this is really hard, but there is some nice guidance. So, you know, a lot of the stickies that you might have seen before, so the business outcomes, the problems, the personas, all that stuff kind of helps you drive to this. So you can kind of see the different colors. And so as a group, so there were 6 of us, I think we had like an hour, maybe 2 hours. It was actually a really long time and it felt like we didn't get a lot done, but we had to create these hypotheses. And we were aiming for 10, but we only actually got 7. But there were 7 really good ones. So I don't think it matters if you can get very many. But for each one, I think the thing that was the hardest was, okay, now that we want to do this thing to solve this business outcome, how are we going to test it? And some of the tests are really easy. So some of the tests are, we're going to show them a picture and we're going to ask them some questions. Some of them are actually a little bit more interesting. I think one of them, if you look about 4 down, we have solve the problem of people having the facts. We were going to do a pop quiz and kind of our way of judging whether or not people knew something. So we were going to like show information to people. But we were going to say if 2 people, random 2 people on 2 different teams know something, then we've succeeded. That's just showing that, you know, the information is spread beyond maybe a small clique of people. And so that was really fun too, because it's like, okay, we're actually going to have evidence that this worked. And so, you know, as a developer, we actually do a lot of test-driven development, and this is actually very similar. We write tests before we write production code. It's just that same concept expanded out further. And really, you know, the reason I love doing that with TDD is it changes my perspective. It makes me think about the problem I'm trying to solve rather than how I'm going to solve it. And I think it's the same thing is true here. We're really focusing on the business problem or the thing that the software will actually fix rather than how we're going to actually build it. Okay. So then came the really fun part. So now that we had 7 of these, we had to figure out which one was the most important. So the reason you want to do this is obviously you can only work on one thing at a time. And the reason for that is you don't really want to jumble up results from multiple initiatives. So doing this in a real world, you know, we did this over a month. We actually had 2 hypotheses that we actually finished or near finished. We didn't get to finish the second one, which I'll explain in a little bit. But, you know, we probably, had we had done more cheaper testing on the second version of the hypothesis, we probably could have tested a few of these by the end of that first month. But because not only were we learning the LeanUX process, we also wanted to build software. We kind of changed the process a little bit and decided, hey, we're going to actually build software. But the cool thing is, like, so you have these hypotheses, you figure out the most important one, then you can put all of your focus there. And when you're done with it, you move on to the next one, or you decide to throw it away. And it's that iterative process, just kind of one thing after the other. From a, you know, like a team member perspective, the coolest thing about this was, hey, this gave me 7 things that may eventually make it into the product. So though I'm only focusing on designing the first one, the types of technologies that might come into play or the types of things I may want to incorporate, I at least have that kind of peek behind the curtain. At least I know I'll be doing something in 3 months, assuming all of our hypotheses are passing and we haven't completely scuttled the project. You know, there's things as delivery team members, like we don't necessarily, we want to know where a product's going, even if we're only going to work on it for a month or 2 months. We kind of want to see that vision. And the cool thing about these hypotheses, they kind of give you that roadmap. Now, the caveat there is they can change every time you test one. You will change and adapt. So it's not a firm timeline, but it just kind of gives you a little bit of a hint of what's ahead. All right, so for the rest of this, I just want to call out the hypothesis we chose. So I mentioned this earlier. You know, we have a contention of conference rooms. We're a relatively small office. We have 4 conference rooms, 28 people, a lot of people working remotely with customers. So, you know, using the conference rooms frequently. So one thing we wanted to do was have fewer unnecessary room booking schedule conflicts. And we thought if we showed people, so Mike B, who is a team member, a visual indication of room availability, then the conference room availability overtime feature would allow that enable that business outcome to be achieved. And the way we were going to test it was a paper mock-up and prove that people understood what we're showing them. So that was our first test. So this is kind of our jumping off point at the end of that 2-day session for the next part, which is actually a design studio. So I am going to pause here, and I do want to give people a chance to ask questions about the LeanUX process, because up till now, that's really all I've covered. What is LeanUX? And I do have 2 experts, Kate and Jesse, that can answer the really hard questions. But I would love to give my version of it first, because I learned a lot in this process. All right, no questions. All right, cool. I'm moving on then. So the next thing we did is called a design studio. So this is actually, I'd done this before, not with LeanUX, and I think this is a really cool process as well. So if you've ever tried to get people to agree on how something works, this is a really cool way of doing it. So so now that we kind of had our hypothesis, we could actually do some real work that actually kind of started bringing a product to life. And so this is what we call a design studio. We actually plan on doing these for each hypothesis. And similar to the LeanUX workshop where, up front you may do a more heavy investment, we don't expect the future ones to all require the same level of investment. So this was kind of like a teach us how to do it, do a practice run. And then as a team, we were able to do this actually a second time on our own. But the whole idea is, similar to the LeanUX stuff we did, we're trying to get a lot of ideas out there, and we're trying to pick kind of the best of breed and kind of smash them together to come up with something that makes sense to all of us. So kind of our first start. So, so here we are. So this is some of our participants, but in the context, you can see our hypothesis in the background. But in the context of this hypothesis, we were all tasked individually, so 6 of us, to draw 6 different ideas about how this hypothesis or how this software could work to achieve this hypothesis. And so, I think at the beginning, we were reminded, if you can't draw well, that's not a big deal. It turns out I think a lot of us could actually draw pretty well, but it turns out you can actually get away with a lot of simple shapes to do these things. The whole idea is you're trying to convey to a human, hopefully the human that's sitting across the room from you that you're explaining this to, just what you're trying to show. So, maybe one person's not a very good drawer. As long as they draw a circle and say, hey, this is a person, even though it looks nothing like a person, that's okay. As long as the crowd understands what that is. Very likely there's somebody there that can draw well, that can do your final version. So the whole point here is to really give you a visual representation that other people can connect to. So all of us did this individual drawings. I think it was 5 to 10 minutes, 6 minutes. All right, thanks. And then we presented them to each other. And I don't know if I think we had 3 minutes to present. So it wasn't like an in-depth presentation. You really couldn't show everything that was on the page. You really had to kind of focus on what you thought was most important. So kind of like all of us individually kind of self-selected our own ideas out of the way. So we all went around, and then, that gives everybody kind of this initial pass at ideas. And then we paired up and we did the same thing again. And so all in all, I think we did this for us. Oops, sorry. We did 2 passes on this. So the first pass was individuals, or no, we did 3 passes, which I didn't show in this diagram because I didn't have pictures of all of them. But, individuals, then we paired up and did the second round and then presented. And then I think we did like teams of 3 and then presented. and then the final one, we were all 6 together at the whiteboard. And it was cool, kind of like how you could see some of these ideas evolve in each round. And ultimately we came up with the design that is in that red box there. There's a lot of the other pieces are important too. They weren't as they didn't connect as well with what I'm about to show you, which was the actual mock-up. But this whiteboard and another one were kind of our canvas for how we were describing what it was we were about to build. And the cool thing was, like, different people on the team would come in and change things and modify things. You can actually see there's a lot of partially erased whiteboard stuff there. So like we scratched like a lot of the ideas like midway through and kind of reorganized it. And so that was cool too. So yeah, I'm trying to think. I think one of these early designs shows very similar to what we ended up with. But in general, like a lot of the aspects that you'll kind of see everywhere, didn't make it in. But I will tell you, we did the second version, and once we were iterating on it, and we actually started thinking about incorporating those things. And then we started thinking of features that actually tied into those things. So it was kind of cool, like, to go through this exercise together, because we kind of seeded each other with all these cool ideas about what we might want to do and might want to try in the future. All right, now the fun part. So we're 3 days in. We've been a team for 3 days. And now we get to actually write some software. So, at WWT, this is a pretty normal thing for us. We're a project-based consulting company. We're really used to starting new software projects. Even if it's not new code, getting together and figuring out how to work together is pretty normal for us. Usually what we'll do is a kickoff. It turns out, in this case, we didn't have somebody available to do a kickoff. And so really all we had going for us was this LeanUX workshop. And it turns out, like, we were okay. We'd worked together. Some of us have worked together before. And so we kind of had some easy go-to processes that we just kind of started doing until we could do a kickoff. But we kind of hit the ground running. So we all walked out of that design studio, and we have an agile business analyst. So it's like a business analyst in the companies here in Springfield, but meant to be more aligned with the agile process. And then a quality advocate. They actually came up with this design. So this is a PowerPoint design. I think it took about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, after the actual design studio. So this happened like the next morning. I think I got in at like 9 that day, and like by 9:30 it was finished. And so like it was really cool. Like, we were ready to test our first hypothesis like 3 hours into being a team. And we did it with this. And so the next step was, we got to get users to try this out. And so we actually, just reached out to our office. Turns out everybody in our office is an actual user. So it was kind of nice to have access to them. And we got like 6 volunteers, maybe it was 8 on the first round. I can't really remember. And we just prompted them with a simple question. We said, you're trying to book a meeting with somebody else in this office. Where do you go? I think we might have qualified it a little differently, but like that was basically the prompt. And then we just wrote down everything they said. And the coolest thing was, after we did that for about 6 to 8 people, we like coalesced them together and like reviewed them together. And it was like amazing how many people said very similar things. And so I called out a few of the ones that we learned from that first testing on this slide. So, some things were just needed a little tweak, right? So, people kept asking, like, what makes it sad? Like, that may mean something different to me than somebody else. So how do I know that that's what it means? And so we decided kind of in our initial passes that we were going to maybe give them a way of seeing what that meant. So we had kind of a scale that would change the faces. And so we just made that visible to them. A lot of people said, I don't even care about the face. All I want to know is the percentage. I'm a numbers person. That's more important to me. And so we actually scaled that up a lot more so that they could equally see that as the face. So that was kind of something we improved based on the feedback. They couldn't see the titles from a distance. We have these are our 4 conference room names, by the way, if you didn't know that. We have the benefit of naming our conference room fun names, but it doesn't do you any good to see that only one room is available if you can't tell which one it is. And so that was how we wanted to fix that. And then the funniest thing, so I think it was about half the people answered the first question exactly right. They're like, yep, I'm going to Serenity. That's the place to be today. And then they started thinking about all the things that went into the bottom section. They're like, wait a second. Winterfell's only open at 4 o'clock today. There's no way. I was like, I swear it's open more than that. It says it's 20% available. That it would have more than one time slot available. You're telling me Hogwarts isn't available until tomorrow? Like, is that the first time it's available? They started asking all these questions and like basically second guessing what the data meant and confusing the heck out of themselves. It was funny. Like, I think the 3 people that like did this, they spent like maybe 2 minutes passing the test. And then the other like 15 minutes, I think one of them even stayed for longer, was talking all about how you would figure out that availability thing at the bottom. And so we're like, you know what? People understood the tool as long as we didn't have that aspect. So we just took it out, which is really cool. I'm a big fan of throwing things away. So we actually had data that said that was causing problems. And so we got to just call it out. And so that was kind of the end of our first hypothesis, because people succeeded at the task that we were trying to get them to do, was tell us which one is the place to be. We actually were done with the first iteration of the hypothesis. Now, so normally, we could go test other hypotheses. Maybe all 7 of those things are critical to our MVP, and we have to have them in before we can release software. So maybe we want to go validate the other ones almost just as quickly. Doing something cheap like a paper prototype, asking users what they think, understanding the data, making decisions based on that data, passing or failing the test, whatever it is. But for us, we decided to actually, let's double down on this feature. We think this feature by itself is valuable. We've had an uptick in conference room availability issues the last couple of weeks. Like, it's really important to get this out sooner than later. So let's, instead of building a prototype, instead of building a paper prototype, just like a picture, let's build an actual working prototype. We think we can get that data pretty easily. We can wire it up really easily, and we'll get to learn a little bit of software while we do it. So, that'll be a good choice. And so our next iteration of the hypothesis was actually building a real working piece of software. And so, we actually were ready to test this one. I think we had started testing this one. The problem is everybody knows, the Monday, I think the 3rd day of the testing, our office got the order to work from home. And so our entire market force for doing this completely dissipated. And so we're like, well, there's no office, so there's no reason to do this. So we actually had to stop at that point. We still don't know if this feature would have been successful. And we don't know if we would continue to build the other ones. Turns out all 7 hypotheses are worthless when you don't have a physical office, which is just bad timing for picking this project. But it was kind of cool because we'd gotten kind of closure, at least enough closure to feel like we did something good. So that's another good thing about iteration. I don't know if any of you guys are like me, but like when you start something, you kind of want to get closure before you leave it. It puts a lot of pressure on us professionals to not want to leave companies. Not that I'm saying you should leave your company, but I will say, working in a place that does iterative development, I don't feel like I ever have that pressure of like, if I leave today, I've accomplished something. I don't have that 2-year project that I have to finish before I feel like I've accomplished it. Well, the same thing's true when you're building software. That release of knowing that it would work for users is a super valuable thing to have. Even if you don't even know that, even though you know they're not even using it yet, just the early data that we got makes me feel like if this did release, if we had a physical office to go to, this would probably be somewhat successful. And so that's a really cool thing to get as well. And so though we did have to pause it, it was like the happiest I've ever seen people be like, with pausing something that they were pouring their heart into. And it's because we got kind of that stopping point, that iterative stopping point. So just to give you kind of the big picture of this timeline, I said before it was a month. It was designed to go on more than a month if we had people available to do it longer. But on the far left side is kind of our spin up. So I told you that took 3 days. So we did our LeanUX workshop based on the problem statement. We did our design studio. We did our initial testing. And then in between, we built a lot of software, which was cool. A lot of people, this was the first time they'd ever done React. So that was kind of the other learning objective of this project, was learn how to do that. We got working software. We had started testing. And then this last picture on the bottom right is actually what it looks like for us to go to work every day now. We exist in a virtual office now. So that's a tool called Sakoko. And therefore, it doesn't matter what conference rooms are available. So the project is currently paused. But just to prove to you it works, I am going to pull it up, assuming I still have it open. Yes, there it is. And so you can see that our office has near 100% availability of all of our rooms today. So just to prove that nobody's going in the office and booking conference rooms.
How is it that Hogwarts is used 86% today?
So we have a lot of recurring meetings that nobody canceled.
Clearly.
So my guess is that's a stand-up or a demo or a retro that people just didn't take off the calendar. Yeah. So yeah, we integrated it with Microsoft. We use Microsoft Office. So this integrates with the calendar data and actually will provide real-time stats. We also have a lot of almost turned on TVs that we're going to display this around the office as well. Yeah, I'm not bitter at all that we had to close the office. So yeah. So anyways, that's really all I have. But I did want to close up with why, I've kind of sprinkled it in here and there, but like, why is this process so valuable? Why did I enjoy this so much? So a couple things, I wanted to, I think the first thing and the more obvious thing is, while we were building the software, there was just a consistent product focus. Anytime we would have a conversation, or have a disagreement, or, try to make some tactical decision, it was like the first thing everybody was talking about was the product. A lot of times in delivery teams, you'll get so bogged down in the technical details. I've seen people duke it out over how to test for 3 hours a day for 5 days straight because they can't figure out the right answer. It was weird. We never really had those really debates or those, because every time we would do it, it'd be like, well, we can figure this out and we can make a decision, but like the product will suffer. So let's worry about the product first. And then when the technical details will kind of come together. Not to say we didn't debate the technical details, but it just changed our focus just enough that I felt like we were always building valuable software, which is something we like to focus on a lot at WWT, being a consultant. The next thing was, team alignment. Like, I have worked on projects where you have like a mock-up that a designer will give you. And, if you're lucky, that designer's around all the time. And if you have a question, you ask them. But even when that's true, there's always these secondary like disagreements about what something means that just happen all the time. And it's not because people don't like it, or being disagreeable. It's because people are trying to get the right answer for the customer. But when we did this, we all kind of knew the right answer because we'd all gone through the process of discovering it together. And so almost everything we did, like the team was kind of all on the same page most of the time. And so that was really cool to see. I mentioned we do team kickoffs at WT. That's actually kind of the purpose of our team kickoffs, is to get everybody on the same page for how we're going to work together over the next month, 3 months, 6 months. But it turns out if you just do the same thing around what the work is, it actually brings you together just the same way. So I thought that was really cool. The next thing I really liked was follow the data. Because we're testing this stuff, we don't have to second guess anything about whether this is the right choice, whether it's the wrong choice. The data can help lead us to the right choice, and we don't have to worry as much about the, the gray areas. You know, I bet if I would have suggested taking out an entire feature from a product, you know, with somebody that hadn't done this process. So like early on, we took out that whole like predictive analysis feature that we were going to do. If I wouldn't had the data to back that decision, I could have agonized over it for, you know, hours, days. I'm sure 3 days later, somebody would have been like, well, why did we shouldn't have cut that feature. And having that data to kind of back up that decision was super powerful. So if you guys are doing these kinds of things, you know, making these decisions about products, having actual, you know, analytics and like user feedback as part of those decisions is super valuable. And then the last thing, and I kind of called this out a little bit in the product focus and team alignment, like things just ran smoothly. Like, I think it's because we all just believed in what we were building. We were all just jazzed up about the fact that we were building this tool for ourselves. We all, you know, we all thought like, hey, we're not UX people, but we're actually doing this work. Like, it was kind of cool to like put ourselves in those shoes. It kind of broke down the barriers, and kind of the whole team just generally felt like we were just moving kind of in a frictionless way, which, sad to say, is not true about all teams. You know, I'd like to think at WWT, most of our teams are what we call high performing teams. But even a high performing team, there'll be a lot of friction to be that high performing team. And not having that friction was just kind of, it just kind of made the month of work very enjoyable. And it was for the right reason. It wasn't because we were avoiding the conflict or what we call artificial harmony. It was because we really understood each other. And so when we would say things, when we talk about things, all of that extra context that lets there be less friction was there already. And it just made everything go a lot smoother. So on that note, I would open up the floor for more questions or general discussion. If you don't have specific questions.
Hey, Ben, I posted the link in Slack already to the book you mentioned, but I noticed that that was an older edition and that there was a newer one. Do you prefer the edition that you showed the cover of, or does it matter if we dig into either of those books?
It's a great question. I'm going to defer to Kate or Jesse. They supplied the book.
Jesse, do you want me to take this?
Sure.
I would recommend reading the second edition, the new edition, just because it's full of new information about how to align things with Agile. They talk a great deal in the last 2 or 3 chapters on different approaches to integrating LeanUX into different Agile styles, whether it's Kanban, kind of continuous integration, continuous delivery versus Scrum or sprint-based kind of, what is that called? Help me out here, Ben. SAFe, structured Agile? No. SAFE.
Scaled Agile Framework is, I think, what you're thinking of. SAFe.
Thank you. I'm thinking of Scaled Agile. So they've got like 2 chapters at the end where they talk about different ways to integrate LeanUX into either a Kanban kind of continuous integration, continuous delivery mechanism versus a SAFe structure.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions?
Compared to other design frameworks you've used in the past, in what ways is LeanUX like a definite improvement?
So I'm going to take a shot at this because I don't know. I'm going to let Jesse or Kate actually answer this. But what I have seen is, the things I've seen is designer needs 3 to 4 weeks to figure out what we're going to build. They give me something. I go implement it. They look at it afterwards and say, yes or no, did I do it correctly? I don't know what that's called, but a lot of my experience working with designers has been that. This was much more approachable, much more involving of me. You know, we did all of the testing, we did all of the mock-ups, things like that. So I would say the biggest benefit of this one is it includes everybody involved. It's not siloed. There's not some expert that's in a room figuring out the answer to your problem. You're figuring it out together. So that's not the real answer. That's just from my experience. But if Kate or Jesse have other trade-offs with other things.
No, I think that's a good answer. I mean, I'll add to it a little bit, like the design studio that Ben talked about. That's basically like a group wireframing exercise. And you know, in the past, wireframing has been like the designer on their own, maybe talking to the product owner to some extent, and just kind of piecing things together, making some decisions that sometimes are right, sometimes are wrong. But whether they're right or wrong, they have all the context. So when you do that all together, it's not necessarily designed by committee, because you still have, you know, a decision maker at the end in the UX person or the product owner. But everybody has now on the whole team, all the developers, the QA, everybody has context. And so even if the designer's gone on Monday and there's a question, it's like, we all kind of did this together. We know what's going on. So yeah, that's a big part of it too. Ben, can you run back on your slides to the personas, the first persona slide? So one thing about this that's so great is this is actually, in this process, this is what in LeanUX is called a Proto Persona. So this, in a lot of ways, really sets you free to create personas, because in LeanUX, it's like, you don't have to go out and do a bunch of user research right from the start or market studies or anything else. They, in many ways, set you free to create this proto persona with just whoever's in the room. And it's a working draft. So as you do those market studies, as you do the user research, you continue to go back to this proto persona, and you clarify, you add to it, you edit, you change. And so as the project progresses, this persona is getting more and more precise toward your real users. So that improves all the feature work and everything else that you're doing too.
Did you have something else, Kate?
Sure. So there, in the current edition of LeanUX, there's 15 kind of LeanUX principles. There's a couple that we focus on in the workshops, and one or two that I think Ben touched on beautifully is, first of all, there's no such thing as a design guru in LeanUX. There's no one person who's ultimately responsible for the interaction design or visual design or even the product design and product outcomes, because the whole team is owning that because of the shared understanding they're creating. So that's wonderful, and that great ideas can come from everywhere. We all have great ideas, regardless of our ability to illustrate them. We all have great ideas. I think the second thing that I wanted to point out was that, and I mentioned this, big upfront design is something you see a lot in agency work. So not just agency work, but also product work. I worked for MasterCard for 13 years. They did a lot of big upfront design because that's what sells an idea. But the reality is all that big upfront design, and Jesse can speak to this, Ben can speak to this, you all can speak to this, that big upfront design can be wasteful. Because at the end of the day, if you're not solving a user need, which is going to deliver the behavior that's going to deliver the business outcome, who cares? I mean, we've all seen comps or mock-ups with centered text, you know, on like main, you know, content areas of the site, and you're thinking, nobody can read that because it's centered. So you ask the designer, you're like, why is that there and why is it centered? They're like, well, nobody's going to read that anyway. The first question is, why is it there? If nobody's going to read it, why is it there other than to fill space? So I think Ben touched on a lot of great ideas out of LeanUX, which is about getting away from big upfront design, getting away from the idea that there's a design guru, and empowering everybody on the team to own the user experience, because the user experience is what is going to deliver the business outcome. Jesse, Ben, anything to add?
Yeah, the big upfront designs are just incredibly wasteful. you know, as it goes on, as you get feedback from users and stuff, you end up not using a lot, and oftentimes it can send you down the wrong direction. And then also it can cause failure because you feel obligated to commit to something that was just envisioned months ago as part of a design process that doesn't really apply anymore.
Hopefully that answers your question, Chris. Any other questions?
So as somebody who kind of ends up working with design and, you know, doing freelance, I'm the only one that's doing it. What are some tips that you guys have working within like this LeanUX? Because it is something that I do. But when you're only one person, what are some things that you guys would recommend to do to kind of get more feedback than just your own thoughts?
All right, I'm going to do the same thing I did last time because I don't want Jesse and Kate to give the entire answer. I'm going to give my perspective first, and then I'll pass to them. You know, actually, my answer is actually based on what I do to make up for the fact that I'm not. So when I work, so software development for me is a very collaborative process. We do pair programming, TDD. So I can draw a parallel to that. So when I am working by myself, I actually do some things to make up for the fact that I don't have a person next to me anymore. One of those things is that whole process we were talking about in terms of idea generation and management. I actually do that myself. So these are all my thoughts about my software development that I'm doing. And so you can actually fake out collaborative partners by doing it yourself and then walking away and coming back. And so that's what I do in software. So that would be my shot or advice of, if you want to do these processes, try to do them, just space out yourself with yourself to give yourself that ability to kind of change perspectives in between. All right, that was my attempt. Jesse or Kate, you're up.
Well, I think you're never going to be truly alone because you have at least the client that's hiring you to do this freelance project, right? And
Sometimes. My experience has been the client doesn't quite, they know what they want the functionality to be, but they don't know what they want beyond that. So kind of helping them through that process of them understanding what the user might be looking for.
right. And this process really helps them to draw those ideas out. And, you know, they're going to know their customers very well, usually. And so even something as simple as like this Proto Persona exercise, to sit down with this client and say, okay, based on what you know about your customers, let's go through here and create a few example customers and start filling this out. It's going to be much more valuable to fill this persona out with your client and get their knowledge of their customer base than it is for you just to do it on your own.
I'd also, I'd plus one what both Jesse and Ben said. And so sometimes customers come to you with a list of features, right? They say, this next release needs to have these 13 features. There's no reason why you can't, as you would, reverse engineer the hypotheses from the feature list. So you could say, okay, you've got this feature, you know, the ability to like tap into their brain and figure out like when their next meeting is, let's say Ben, some sort of telekinesis. And then you'd say, okay, so what is the user need that is solving? So what is the need that's solving? I need to know what conference rooms are available for this fictitious meeting I think I need to schedule. And then you would say, so who is the most important person who needs to use that feature, right? So you'd say, we have 5 different user types, but if this one person doesn't use that feature, it's wasted. And then you say, okay, so if this specific person can get this need accomplished with this feature, what measurable business impact is that having on you? What's what's the benefit? Like, is there a cost saving? Is there a revenue generation? You could do that for every feature. It takes a little time and a little bit of creativity and how you have the conversation to make it seem more exciting and collaborative than I need you to create 10 hypotheses, which I did to Ben and his team. But you can do it for each feature and say, okay, if this is the #1 priority, let's just walk this back through. And once we build this, or I design it, is there any way that we can validate that this is true through paper prototype, walkthroughs, or to Jesse's point, some sort of way to quickly get feedback from end users or near end users? So hopefully that answers your question, but I think that there's a way to use these same techniques even if you're halfway into a project or all the way into a project.
See why I got the experts to come on? I couldn't advertise it because I wasn't sure if they were coming until, a couple days ago, but they actually know the real answers. Any other questions? I think we're getting close.
Out of curiosity, so I work in corporate headquarters for BKD here in Springfield, and we'll work on different product, and we generally don't develop our own stuff. We usually hire it out. There's a few little instances where we've built our own things. That said, though, I lead, I guess, our innovation portfolio, which is new products and new area products or services that we go to market with. That said, we actually kind of have a process that's a little bit different. I've not read this book, but there's a lot of similarities. So I'm kind of intrigued to go get this book and read it. But that said, I'm curious, your experience using LeanUX, what percentage of your investment in a software project would you say is attributed to this process you just outlined for us today? And let's not talk about maybe smaller, let's talk about $1 million to say $2.5 million projects. How much of an investment, or how much, is this 0.5%? Is it 5%? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've never done this at scale, so I believe Kate has though, so.
I do know. So we sell LeanUX workshops at a standard rate of, it's a fixed bid project. It's about 85 to 95K, depending on whether they want high fidelity mocks. So the base deliverable is storyboards, because we feel from an industrial design perspective, storyboards are the best way to illustrate kind of what's going to happen in context. So figure that a typical web app costs anywhere between $750 and $1 million. And this costs you 85 to 90,000. You do the math, Brett.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And that's actually very consistent with like any sort of UX investment. There's the 1 to 10 to 100 multiplier that they've talked about for the last 40 years of software, which is for every $1 you spend doing any amount of UX research upfront and validation, you spend $10 in redesigning it, meaning refactoring the design, and $100 for every $1 you spend in refactoring the code. Because we know, I mean, Ben, you and I have talked about the cost of refactoring code, whether it's front end, middleware, back end, it's expensive. So if you've built the wrong thing, and then you add into that the cost to acquire a new customer. I worked for MasterCard for 13 years. The cost to acquire a customer the first time and the cost to re-attract them after you've lost them is like 1,000 times. 1,000. So you spend $1 building the right experience up front, you save $1,000 per that same customer trying to reacquire them later. Does that make sense, Brett?
Gotcha. Oh yeah, yeah.
It's very cheap compared to the cost of actually delivering software.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I will say in our short example, the upfront cost is what Kate was talking about. Once you do that as a group, the iterations are significantly cheaper, like significantly. Like I think our second iteration took us 15 minutes in the bullpen. So it's not a lot of, kind of once you lay the groundwork and you get that comfort level of doing the process actually moves very quickly. And so it's not a continual reinvestment of those 3 days. every time you add a new feature. Any other questions?
Just an aside, so how often do you receive from a client the completed UX, say this LeanUX in the form of like the software we use, a lot of our, I guess, UI designers use is iRise. So we'll complete an entire iRise and say, that's what we want, and deliver it and say, can you build this for us? Do you see that often? Would you go back, if you receive that, would you go back and recommend redoing via LeanUX process if you received that? Maybe two questions.
So you're asking a really interesting theoretical question. So first of all, if somebody has a complete prototype in iRise, that to me is big upfront design. It means they've done some amount of foundational research that's turned into kind of requirements that somebody has put into interaction and visual design specifications. And my assumption is that they've probably done some amount of validation. Now, in highly regulated industries like aerospace and medical devices and nuclear energy, that is required by the guidelines for quality system regulation. But in consumer software, even when I worked at MasterCard, I mean, yeah, you can feel like you're dying if you can't get into your bank account, probably, but for the most part, it's not life and death questions. It's not questions that, like, if you design this wrong, somebody's going to be injured and die. So I'd say if they got to that point, I'd ask a lot of questions about, so tell me about the foundational research you did. Like, did you do contextual inquiry? Did you do usability testing on the current system? Can I see the data? Can I see what you learned? And see how you interpreted the response, just to see if there's any questions I have about the validity of the design decisions they've made. If they said, oh no, we just designed this based upon what the business said they needed, then I would ask questions like, okay, let's look at each of these features and say, what is the human behavior you're trying to deliver with this feature? And how is that human behavior delivering the business value you're trying to achieve? And if they can't answer that, then I might say we need an abbreviated version of LeanUX. Jesse, Ben, any kind of perspectives on that?
Yeah, I can add, I mean, kind of on it in going down a different road here, but on this question, I did have a client, I was on a delivery team for a client, and they're an enterprise operation with several thousand retail stores. And they came to us, like in the slide we're seeing, this is how a lot of software has gone in the past. They came to us with this feature list. So it's just what we see here in purple, going down a Word document of all these things that we were expected to deliver. Well, that's how a lot of these software projects go. It's all about the features, right? Well, LeanUX is kind of a philosophy that's bigger than all the points that we've looked at today. And so as part of that, it's just like, let's just get out there and do something, right? Let's just go out there and talk to people. So without setting up some huge proposal for user research, I was just like, hey, let me go out to one of your stores for a couple hours. So they're like, okay. So I go out to one of their stores, just kind of watch what's going on and talk to some of the employees for a couple hours. On this feature list that they had given us, one of the most expensive ones, if not the most expensive as far as time and therefore their cost. The employees, I mean, from the very start, when I mentioned it, they're like, oh no, we don't care about that. We're not going to use that. And this was their biggest feature, right? A couple more of them were just very low, like the employees didn't really care. So, just taking this back to them, we ended up, they deprioritized, actually cut those features that in a typical situation they would have gone through and paid for and we would have built. And it's just amazing. It really blows people's minds when they get out of this purple column, which is what we always circle around, and you have to say, what user is this for? The pink column there. What outcome is it going to give them? and what business outcome in the blue column do we want from this? I mean, it's just amazing how as much talk and as many meetings and everything else that companies have leading up to delivering one of these feature lists to a software company, when they start to ask those questions and look at those other columns, the prioritization completely changes. And you know, a lot of stuff gets cut and a lot of things that were completely overlooked get added. The most valuable things, you know.
That raises a good quote from the book, from the textbook, which is LeanUX is an exercise in ruthless prioritization. We at Worldwide don't like ruthless, we like rigorous. So we've changed it to LeanUX is an exercise in rigorous prioritization. And the other thing we always say, and I said this to Jesse and I said this to Ben and his team, if you can't prove that your hypothesis is true or not, it's not a hypothesis. So if you can't figure out a testing strategy and what success looks like, I said to Ben, I said, you know, he's like, well, 80% is a good number. And I'm like, well, what if it's like 75? If 75% of the people do it, is that still success? He's like, probably. I'm like, well, what if only 5%? He's like, that's probably failure. So again, it's about rigorous prioritization and saying, what's the most important thing to prove next? And what's the smallest, cheapest thing we can build to prove that our next most important hypothesis is true or not?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about that. So even looking at an iRise prototype that somebody spent probably 120 to 160 hours building, you can always ask that question and say, what have you done to prove that this is true?
Yeah. Yeah, truthfully, we do have a pretty rigorous upfront persona process. We, this particular idea, we've actually have patents pending on it and have invited in, not just, we use personas like you just described there, where we, put a picture up or draw a cartoon, or these were actual true individuals we brought in and, walked them through, a first phase, which was just a big whiteboard markup. And the second phase was whiteboard markup with sticky notes. And then the third phase, and now we have a prototype to show them. And then of course get their feedback. So yeah, we take a lot of care in that as well, and totally agree with you. Even before we spend time on an iRise, we want to make sure the trajectory is proper, and you're right. We're not building something that the expensive piece that's priority number 15, not 2, so yeah.
So Brett, a lot of the kind of foundational research I've been involved in as part of product development for medical devices is very expensive. It's usually weeks, if not months, of contextual inquiry and then work modeling, and then kind of make sense of what are the opportunities. The beauty of LeanUX is there are situations, less risky situations, less risk-averse customers who are like, I'm willing to take a chance, and I'm okay with being wrong as long as I'm wrong early. And yeah, we are, as an Agilist culture at Worldwide, are all about, let's be willing to pivot when we realize we're going in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. Let's not put all our eggs in one basket. What is it, Ben? The value of the work not done is one of our delivery principles. And so when you think about lean startup, it's about build a little something, put it out in the world, measure how it works, and then be willing to pivot, be willing to learn. Yeah. And so I think, Brett, it depends on the industry, it depends on the context, it depends on the user and the use case. But I think that there's arguments for both. I mean, in my career, 25 years in human factors, I've done everything from multi-year ethnographies with patients who are delivering analgesics by themselves in hospitals to very rapid consumer experiences. And a lot of it comes down to, as you know, as a consultant, it depends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good.
All right, I do want to be respectful of people's time. I think this is supposed to go until 8:30 on the Zoom. So I would like to conclude the talk, but people are welcome to hang out and chit chat.